to start off on the portion of your portfolio that primarily focuses on economic development, particularly in light of the events this summer with the United States and, of course, Donald Trump. Your government made some pretty distinct decisions to back off on certain counter tariffs as well as the digital services tax. What are we as Canadians getting in return?
Look, Canadians should understand that we still have the best deal in the world when it comes to trade with the United States. Right now, the average tariff for Canadian goods crossing the border is about 5.5%. Around the world, it's about 16%. Now, some of our industries, steel, aluminum, auto, they're obviously being hit really hard. And the main goal of the negotiations going on right now is, one, to make sure that we preserve our existing advantage and not to make a bad deal, but to secure that existing advantage. And it was good to see over the summer that in executive orders, the United States government also confirmed that that trade under our free trade agreement is protected. And then from that, the complex negotiations that are going on all the time and every day, building towards something more comprehensive and fair. And of course, that will help our industries.
So do I infer from that that we essentially capitulated on those other points in order to just maintain what we have? And is that good enough?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Look, you're negotiating in a long-term negotiation. And what you first want to do is make sure that we preserve our existing advantages. And that's really key. That's going on. The negotiations on the rest of the deal with steel, with aluminum, with auto, that's going on, and it's been really constructive so far. And I think what you're seeing here is, as the Prime Minister said, and someone like me who played hockey as well, there's times when you drop the gloves, and there are times when you're playing and you're trying to score goals. Right now, this negotiation is ongoing. It's very, very productive. And I think that Canadians will see lots of progress. But again, I've been touring Southern Ontario, which is really the front line about this, because in my job, talking to tool and die makers and auto makers, unions and CEOs and workers, and look, they appreciate that they don't want a bad deal. They want a good deal going forward to build on the existing competitive advantages that we have. And that's exactly what the Prime Minister and Dom LeBlanc and others are doing every single day. And they're making progress. Is it complicated? Absolutely. But it's vital to make sure we get the right deal at the right time.
With great respect, I have to challenge the idea that the evidence of progress exists. Like, what is that evidence? What we saw on Friday, for example, was instead evidence that the economy contracted in the last quarter the most it has since COVID, outside of COVID, at 1.6%. There are thousands of people who lost their jobs last month. What is the evidence that things are progressing in a positive direction with the United States? Like, where is that evidence?
Well, let me just repeat. Over 86% of our goods are still not subject to tariffs. That's unique around the world. That's not happening with other countries around the world. So, let's not lose sight of the main thing. That's a really important competitive advantage. You've seen other countries have trade relationships change radically. So that's the first thing. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a tough time. It's an economic crisis. We've seen the Prime Minister say that. That's what the election was about. And these are tough negotiations, but they're going on. But again, you've got to make sure you preserve the wins and be practical and be pragmatic and not accept a short-term deal that is not in the interest of the country, but work to preserve your advantages and then keep the ball in play to make sure that you're getting a good deal.
You point to, for example, the region of the country that you're focused on when it comes to economic development and the significance in particular of steel, but also aluminum to that region. That's one example where the United States is disproportionately punishing us with tariffs. Your government refuses to match those with counter tariffs that are commensurate in nature. How far is your government willing to go in capitulating on various areas or not matching when it comes to counter tariffs? Or is there a point in which you will recognize a bad deal and walk away?
Yeah. First of all, there's no capitulation. Let's be clear. Zero. Never, never. That's not happening. And we have had counter tariffs on steel and aluminum. But we're trying to match exactly what the Americans have done. But look, this is an important trading relationship. Most of our goods are traded freely, and we are going to make sure that we establish fair ground rules with the U.S., and that's what the Prime Minister is doing. That's what the negotiating team is doing, to make sure that those industries like steel, like aluminum, like autos, get a fair deal, and that these industries are moving from just reliance to resilience. And that's what the programs of support are about, the resilience. And that's what widening our trade is about. Prime Minister going to Germany, that's key. But also, there's no capitulation for a bad deal. We've seen examples of deals that would not work for Canada. We are focused on making sure two things. One, we control the things we control, knocking down barriers inside Canada, making sure we got tax breaks for Canadians, making sure that industry is getting support. And two, a fair negotiation with the United States that, again, is productive. Canadians appreciate this is complicated. Canadians appreciate that this is ongoing, but they also appreciate that Canadians are not going to settle for a bad deal. They're going to get a good deal. And that's what these negotiations are all about.
And I do appreciate the complexity of this as well. But when you say no capitulation, never, we removed the DST just to keep those negotiations going. The United States didn't remove something at the same time. We removed those counter-tariffs on compliant goods with the USMCA or the CUSMA, but they didn't reduce tariffs on steel and aluminum. Like, can you understand how Canadians view that as not elbows up, as your party campaigned on during the federal election, but capitulation?
Yeah, but you got to make sure you're characterizing this in a fair way. What the Prime Minister did very clearly was match what the United States did. Those existing tariffs were tariffs that came on during the around fentanyl and certain issues. What we have now is matching Canadian and American tariffs to level the playing field. And again, these are complicated negotiations, and we're making sure that Canada and the U.S. have a matched playing field in terms of tariffs to allow for these negotiations to stay on track. That is what negotiations all about.
And I totally take your point on that. I would just point out, as far as matching goes, yes, with the counter tariffs, when it comes to the goods you pointed out, we have not matched steel and aluminum tariffs. We're at half of the counter tariff that they put in place. But I want to move on to AI, because that's a huge part of your portfolio as well. And I've read everything that you said about it so far since you became minister, and I can see that you and your government have a very specific vision for the degree to which AI will transform society. You and I have both spoken to godfathers of AI like Yoshua Bengio and Geoffrey Hinton, who early on, at the outset of kind of the onset of AI, pointed out that there are some very specific risks. I know you've talked loosely about mitigating those risks, but I wondered, from your vantage point as the minister who's overseeing AI for this country, if you believe, like Geoffrey Hinton, like Yoshua Bengio, that one of those risks posed by AI is the extinction of humanity.
So, Vashi, I've spoken to Yoshua Bengio, who, by the way, is at Mila, one of the great institutes that we support in Montreal. Geoffrey Hinton, the other godfather, just so folks know who these names are, really the inventor and the pioneer of AI, who works at Vector, one of the three key AI institutes that the government supports, the other, Amy, in Edmonton. Look, I speak to them a lot. I know about them. Geoffrey Hinton is deeply concerned about things like AI and the autonomous use of autonomous weapons. So that's a key thing. Let's not reduce what they're saying. Yoshua Bengio, very active in terms of building AI to help AI safety. He's very involved in something called our Canadian AI Safety Institute, which Canada has to monitor safety. So look, nobody is underestimating the benefit, or the risks and or the benefits of AI. But both of them are very much they're pioneers of a technology that is transformative. And let's not over-index just talking about the risk. Vashi, we've got 150,000 plus people who are working in AI industries all the time. We've got billions of dollars being invested in small, incredible entrepreneurial companies. We know this is a tool, and this is the most important thing. AI is a tool that we now have for productivity. And companies across the board, the banks are using it for productivity, government's using it for productivity, healthcare is using it for productivity, and it will serve Canadians well. Vashi, there's a companies, for example, in healthcare, I've seen them that, use AI to identify a mole on your skin. So instead of waiting 12 to 23 days for a dermatologist, it can give you instant feedback. AI can help productivity. So I do think safety is important, but one of the challenges that Canada's got is we pioneered AI with Jeffrey Hinton and Joshua Bengio, but our rates of AI adoption are about 8 to 10% behind other G7 countries. So, instead of just talking about extinction, which is a hypothetical situation, these are tools that we need to use to keep Canadians competitive, to build the economy of the future. And when you see the incredible companies that I've seen that are using it, again, I'll just give you one more example because it's not real to a lot. There's a company called Geotab in Oakville. They have, the CEO told me, he goes, look, AI is not replacing workers at all. We have 2,700 people. They're a private company. They're an incredible tech company, but they say we give AI as a tool to our workers so they're more efficient. They haven't lost workers, they've hired workers.
I understand what you're saying. The impetus of my question is not to over-index the risk. As I view it, as I've read from what you've said and what the Prime Minister has said, your government has one primary function as you view it, and that is to incentivize the adoption more widely and to sort of reinforce or enforce data sovereignty for Canada. But when you say, AI will serve Canadians well, I think part of that is mitigating potential risks. And your predecessor who oversaw AI at the time, Minister Champagne, in that role, would not detail how the government viewed the risk. In multiple instances I had to ask him. It's not about over-indexing and trying to put fear into people. Like, I get it, the revolution is here, it's going to happen. But in order for it to serve Canadians as best as possible, don't we need to be realistic about what the risks are and therefore mitigate them? Will your government, for example, introduce some sort of legislative framework to mitigate those risks, or are you abandoning that?
Trust and safety is critical. So I'm not avoiding that. In fact, it's key. Now, just so folks know, there was a piece of legislation that you would know, Vashi, called C-27, that was had 3 parts to it. That was about updating our privacy. And then there was an element that was bolted on a little later on AI. I have said publicly that part of our legislative agenda, which we haven't finalized yet, that the Prime Minister will finalize, will be to reintroduce parts of that specifically around privacy, protecting Canadians' privacy and Canadians' data. Consumers, and they want protection, and that will build trust in order for them to adopt AI and use those tools. Absolutely key. So again, it's not about abandoning or choosing a road. You got to do both.
Okay, I am out of time. Thank you so much, Minister, for your time. I appreciate it today. As always, thanks.
Thanks, Vash.